Then do it yourself.
Everyone remembers Walt's first kill, but no one realizes how Crazy 8 taught him to do it.
Like the other one out in the RV. He's,
For a man chained to a pole with a bike lock, Crazy 8 certainly gave one hell of a performance. His soft-spoken sympathy, his gentle nods about cancer, his stories about growing up, all of it played like a sermon from a man rediscovering his humanity. And yet, beneath the humility, was the same calculating opportunist who had built a career out of deception. Crazy 8 wasn't bonding with Walter White. He was rehearsing for his release. This is, after all, the same man who ratted out his cousin to the DEA, betrayed his partners, and treated snitching as an entrepreneurial skill. His charm wasn't compassion, it was camouflage. In that basement, he wasn't seeing a dying chemistry teacher. He was seeing an opening.
You want to leave money for your family?
The conversation wasn't an exchange of souls. It was a negotiation for survival. His empathy existed only as long as it increased his odds of walking out alive. But the brilliance of Breaking Bad lies in making the audience want to believe him. For a few minutes, the show lures us into Walt's delusion, that this cornered criminal might possess a shred of decency.
You're not angry?
We see Crazy 8's calm, his apparent remorse, even a flash of concern when Walt coughs.
Do you used to sell cribs?
A crib, then.
The illusion is convincing because the best liars always borrow a little truth. Crazy 8 didn't have to care about Walt to sound like he did. He only needed to remember what fear felt like.
Get the key.
Of course, the missing shard of plate shatters that illusion, literally and figuratively. When Walt discovers it's gone, the entire performance collapses. The man who seemed so reasonable, so down to earth, had been clutching a weapon the entire time. Whether that shard was meant for attack or self-defense hardly matters. What matters is that Walt believed it was an attack. That belief turned him from frightened teacher to calculating killer. The moment he stopped pleading with the universe and started playing its game.
Am I supposed to memorize this?
We need to practice, Walt.
Yeah.
We need to be word perfect.
And in that moment, Walt learned more than how to kill. He learned how to manipulate. Crazy 8's smooth, empathetic con became the prototype for Heisenberg's own brand of psychological warfare.
And his eyes were all red like he's been crying or something.
Later, when Walt sobbed in front of Hank to plant a bug in his office, it wasn't desperation, it was theater. The student had learned from the basement tutor.
I don't know what to do.
Yet Crazy 8's mistake wasn't just underestimating Walt, it was misreading the situation entirely. He saw a meek, terminal man and assumed weakness. But desperation is the deadliest drug Breaking Bad ever sold, and Walt was already hooked. Crazy 8 thought he was managing a harmless old man with cancer. Instead, he was staring down the birth of a sociopath. Some argue Crazy 8 might have gone to the DEA instead of attacking Walt, that the shard was only insurance. But even if that were true, the end result would have been the same. Walt destroyed. Whether by knife or by arrest, Crazy 8's escape plan ensured he'd win and Walt would lose. The sincerity of his empathy, if any existed, was irrelevant. It was emotional theater meant to soften the guard of a man he planned to betray. And betray he would have. He wasn't a tragic figure undone by circumstance. He was a manipulator who miscalculated his mark. The irony is that his manipulation worked too well. Walt almost let him go. One missing shard of ceramic was all that stood between Crazy 8 and freedom, and all that pushed Walter White over the moral cliff. In the end, Crazy 8's greatest talent was also his undoing. He was a con artist who believed he could charm anyone, even a man teetering on the edge of madness. But in trying to play the meek chemistry teacher, he helped create Heisenberg, the monster who would perfect the very art that killed him. Empathy? Hardly. It was survival, laced with deceit. And like every other predator in Breaking Bad, Crazy 8 learned too late that Walter White didn't need a meth empire to be dangerous. He only needed a reason. You didn't cheer when Walter White died. You exhaled. Because finally, the nightmare was over. There are few finales in television history that managed to land so squarely between satisfaction and heartbreak.
Asian, pay up, sucker.
Hey, first name Emilio.
Felina, The final chapter of Breaking Bad does exactly that.
Kind of under the weather?
It closes every door with precision, yet leaves a void so immense it feels like losing a part of one's own moral compass. It's not a happy ending, but then again, nothing about Walter White's story was designed for comfort. His death, though inevitable, carried an almost disarming serenity. A man at peace not because he was redeemed, but because he finally stopped lying, if only for a minute.
I did it for me.
When he told Skylar, "I did it for me," it wasn't confession, it was liberation. For once, the chemist dropped the act and admitted what everyone already knew. This was never about family. It was about ego, power, and a desperate need to matter. That moment alone justified every ounce of misery that preceded it. Skylar's relief wasn't forgiveness. It was exhaustion leaving her body. After years of deception, she finally got a sliver of honesty. The kind that burns more than it heals. Walt's time in isolation had done what bullets and betrayals never could. Humbled him.
And the men who stole it from us, the men who still have it, they murdered Hank.
Hank's death cracked the illusion of genius that had carried him this far. The cabin exile stripped him of his empire, his family, and his delusions. By the time he returned, the Heisenberg persona had withered, leaving behind a man ready to clean up his own wreckage, in the most Walt way possible. Methodical, violent, and laced with theatrical flair. The final act, a remote-controlled massacre, a confession, and a mercy killing, was a grim symphony of justice.
Then do it yourself.
Jesse's refusal to shoot him was the perfect punctuation mark. Walt's death wasn't tragic, it was appropriate. The man who built his empire from lies died alone, surrounded by the machinery of his own obsession. And yet, against all reason, there was melancholy, because Breaking Bad had achieved the impossible.
What's your name?
Heisenberg.
Turning a chemistry teacher into a Shakespearean figure of moral decay, and then somehow making the audience grieve for him. The emotional whiplash was deliberate, admiration curdling into disgust, disgust fading back into pity. As one viewer aptly summarized, we loved him, we hated him, and we loved him again. Not everyone saw perfection, of course. Some argued that Felina lacked the gut punch of Ozymandias, that it felt like an aftershock rather than the quake itself.
Meth? Who gives a shit about meth? We won the lottery here.
Jack, with his comic book evil, was a weak successor to Gus Fring's surgical menace. Lydia's death, a callback more than a climax, tied loose ends but added little else. The finale, they claimed, was less about catharsis and more about cleanup. But even in its neatness, Felina never betrayed the show's moral fabric. Walt didn't win, Jesse didn't triumph, and nobody walked away whole. The episode understood that closure doesn't require comfort, only truth.
We don't want your money, Walt.
If there's one thread left dangling, it's Flynn, the son who never got the full story, never got to confront the man behind the myth. His hatred was absolute, and perhaps it needed to be. Walt forfeited the right to explanation long before his final bow.
I don't think
On my son's 18th birthday.
The gesture of leaving money through Gretchen and Elliot was vintage Heisenberg, manipulative, brilliant, and utterly futile. The empire business, even in death, was about control. Breaking Bad ended the way all great tragedies do, not with redemption, but with recognition. The audience didn't cheer for Walt's death. They sighed in grim relief. The king was gone, the chaos complete, and what remained was silence, the kind that follows a perfect chemical reaction, precise, irreversible, and devastatingly final. Because the truth is simple. Felina didn't just end a show. It ended an era of television that dared to make evil so human, it hurt to watch him die. They say Walter White killed Gus Fring, but the truth is, he replaced him. There's a dark irony running through Breaking Bad. Every man who claims to be smarter than the last ends up making the same fatal mistake.
We're just getting started.
For Walter White, That meant becoming the very thing he once despised, Gus Fring, with a goatee and a worse temper. Gus's 3-month deal was never a business arrangement. It was a countdown, a polite way of saying, "You're brilliant, Walter, but replaceable."
Within a month, I'd say.
2 weeks.
Gale was already waiting in the wings, the quiet successor to Walt's temporary genius.
You do this. All you'll have left.
Gus never intended to let Walt walk away alive. He would simply extend the illusion of partnership until his lab was fully operational without him. Then, it would be time for Walt's retirement, a euphemism that, in Gus's vocabulary, meant a hole in the desert.
Jack, hold up.
It's almost poetic, then, that Walt later began rehearsing that same script with Jesse. By season 5, Jesse was no longer a partner. He was an expendable liability. Walt had already begun grooming Todd as the next Gale. His mentorship had curdled into manipulation, his affection into control. The man who once raged against being treated as disposable now saw no issue disposing of others.
You still owe me.
Some insist Walt could never have killed Jesse, that beneath the Heisenberg mask still lingered a trace of humanity. But that line was crossed long before the finale. He handed Jesse over to Jack's neo-Nazi crew, fully aware of what would happen, and even weaponized the memory of Jane's death as a final sadistic wound. The act may not have ended in a bullet, but it was an execution all the same. The parallel between Walt and Gus is impossible to ignore. Both men justified everything in the name of order.
Speaking of the business.
Both led double lives, wearing politeness like armor. Both calmly watched a child die when it served their ends.
Methylamine, Lydia. Can you still get it?
Even that eerily polite exchange between Walt and Lydia at the car wash echoes Gus's brand of cordial menace. The difference lies only in self-awareness. Gus knew exactly what he was, a meticulous killer who valued control above emotion.
Why would your estranged husband be doing all this for you?
Walt, meanwhile, convinced himself it was all for family, right until the moment he sold that family's soul.
The person who gave me this present wanted me dead.
In the end, Walt didn't just kill Gus, he became him. And had Jesse stayed by his side, the inevitable would have followed. History doesn't just repeat in Breaking Bad. It cooks the same batch, over and over again. Walter White didn't save Skyler in that phone call. He saved his ego. By the time Breaking Bad reaches Season 5, Episode 14, the infamous Ozymandias,
What the hell do you know about it anyway? Nothing.
Walter White is no longer a man. He's an empire of ego wrapped in flesh,
I have $11 million.
still demanding reverence even as it all burns down around him.
Terminalo.
The episode's chaos, Hank's execution, the knife fight, the phone call with Skyler, strips away every illusion of morality Walt ever clung to. For a moment, it almost seems like he's doing something decent.
And he's just dragging me down while I do everything.
His tirade over the phone sounds like an attempt to protect Skyler, crafting a narrative for the police that casts her as an abused, clueless wife, rather than an accomplice. To some, this was his final act of decency, clearing her name, making sure his family could survive without him.
You mark my words, Skyler.
But beneath the ashes of that interpretation lies something much darker. Walt's self-sacrifice has always come with a crown. This phone call isn't an act of love. It's a performance, a declaration of dominance. He needs Skyler, the cops, and the entire world to remember who orchestrated every move. The man who once justified mass murder as doing it for the family now performs villainy with theatrical precision. Because even in defeat, Walter White cannot bear to be ordinary.
Confirming the abduction. Amber alert.
And then there's Holly. The most human moment of all. Precisely because it wasn't planned. Walt's kidnapping of his infant daughter isn't a scheme, it's a reflex. In that instant, she's the only family member who hasn't turned against him. the only one too young to see the monster. His love for her is real, but it's drenched in desperation. The dying gasp of a man trying to possess something pure before the world takes everything else away. Ozymandias isn't Walt's fall. It's his unveiling.
You killed him.
Every mask, every rationalization, every fragile excuse crumbles. He's not clearing Skylar's name out of love. He's cementing his own legend out of pride. The tragedy isn't that Walter White became evil. It's that he always needed to be the smartest, most powerful, most dangerous man in the room, even when that room was on fire. Walter White didn't break bad. He broke everyone around him, and called it closure.
I am not in danger, Skylar. I am the danger.
At this point in Breaking Bad, questioning Walter White's concern for collateral damage is like asking if a hurricane worries about puddles.
Might be the thing that put this little boy in the hospital.
By the finale, Walt's moral compass had long since dissolved, probably somewhere between poisoning a child and bombing a nursing home.
That would be the ricin I gave you.
So the idea that he might have accidentally killed a few strangers at the cafe while assassinating Lydia Rodarte Quayle is almost quaint. Let's start with the ricin. The poison is lethally efficient. A few grains can shut down a human body with surgical precision. Lydia only needed a sip of her precious chamomile to meet her fate. Yet the over-anxious viewer can't help imagining a chain reaction. An unwashed cup, a careless dishwasher, or some unsuspecting customer sipping death with their latte. But here's the thing. Ricin isn't a zombie virus. It doesn't linger in the air plotting its next host. It's a protein, not a curse. The heat and detergent of a standard dishwasher would reduce it to molecular mush. In short, the cafe patrons were fine. Probably.
Nothing stops this train.
But even if they weren't, would Walt have cared? The man once sent an elderly neighbor into a potentially booby-trapped house just to make sure he wouldn't get shot. He orchestrated an explosion in a retirement home. He set fire to a gas station, poisoned a child, and turned a machine gun into a sprinkler system of death. Concern for bystanders was not exactly his brand. By the time of Lydia's demise, guilt was a luxury he'd pawned for power.
You all know exactly who I am.
The method, however, was pure Heisenberg. Cold, theatrical, and poetic. Walt could have detonated Gus Fring's demise with a remote. He'd already proven that technology worked. But instead, he let Hector Salamanca's bell ring in the apocalypse. It wasn't about efficiency. It was about narrative symmetry. Gus died at the hands, or bell, of the man he despised most. Walt's choice wasn't strategic. It was artistic. The same twisted artistry guided Lydia's end.
Never mind. I brought my own.
She was predictable, meticulous, and enslaved to her habits. Walt didn't have to improvise. He simply planted the poisoned stevia at her regular table, at her regular hour, and let her routine do the killing for him.
I slipped it into that stevia crap that you're always putting in your tea.
And no, he didn't need to stand watch to make sure no one else grabbed the packet. Lydia's compulsive rituals, same seat, same drink, same stevia, made her the easiest mark he ever had. Vince Gilligan even confirmed that on the show's podcast. Walt knew her schedule to the minute. She was doomed by her own perfectionism.
If I can't kill you, you'll sure as shit wish you were dead.
For all the scientific precision in Walt's schemes, his moral calculus was blunt. If it served the mission, it was justified. Every explosion, every manipulation, every unfortunate casualty was collateral in the service of his empire. Or, by the finale, his ego. The ricin wasn't just poison. It was punctuation. A final, elegant reminder that Walter White didn't merely make meth. He made sure his endings had style, no matter how many innocents might have brushed up against the edges of his chaos. By the time the cup hit the dish rack, Walter White's conscience was already cold. Every sip has a cost. Ours is just one click. Subscribe.